Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Watier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Watier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Doing fantastic, my friend. We're going to have a good conversation around a cool research article that just came out of the Frontiers in Nutrition. It's a systematic review, one of our favorite kinds. It came out in December of 2025, so just a couple of months ago. And the title of the article is Intermittent Fasting Improves Metabolic Outcomes and Metabolic Syndrome, a systematic review and meta-analysis with grade evaluation. So, gold standard study looking at intermittent fasting and comparing it to consistent calorie restriction, the eat less, move more, dieting mentality. So If you're new to Fasting for Life, welcome in. This is what we do. We're going to go through this article. We'll do a brief dive, not a deep dive. We'll keep it simple. And we'll give you some true actionable things that you can put into your day-to-day life now to adopt a fasting lifestyle, lose the weight once and for all, prevent those medications, reverse that metabolic disease, and get the health and longevity that you've truly been looking for. So if you're new, welcome in. You want to know more about why we do what we do, how fasting transformed our lives personally, head back to episode 0, episode 1, give it a listen. You'll know why we do what we do week in and week out, why we're motivated to continue to have these conversations, create the resources, do the challenges, have the coaching, and bring you a hopefully great episode week in and week out. So welcome in. If you are a long-term listener, thank you so much for continuing to be on this journey with us. This is not a DIY. This is a DWI, a done-with-you journey. We are living, breathing, and figuring it out as we go as well. And I can't believe that we're 320-plus episodes in, Tommy. We're still talking about fasting.
Right?
Like breaking the first 2 rules of fasting. Don't talk about fasting and don't talk about fasting. If you're new, don't tell everybody what you're doing. Keep it quiet. Let the results speak for themselves.
Keep it within your inner circle, right?
Yeah.
Especially at first, gaining that confidence. But we're all here in the tree of trust. That's why we can have these conversations freely and really just kind of uncover some new avenues of not just new methods, but new how and why behind some of those methods. Because a lot of times what we're kind of missing is not a better strategy, but a better reason to go take action on the strategy, right? And so I feel like this conversation is really going to hit at some of that, where we can pour gas on the fire, do more of what we know to be working or we think might be working, and really tug on that thread so that we can maximize our results.
So if we're looking at this study and how it's going to apply to you adopting a fasting lifestyle, well, first we're going to just talk about kind of overview of what it is, what they did, and then we'll talk about the action steps and the implications of how to adopt it in a day-to-day kind of real-world setting. So they looked at it was a meta-analysis, systematic review. They looked at 10 randomized controlled trials, 701 participants with metabolic syndrome. So what does that mean? What is metabolic syndrome? So when we look at metabolic syndrome, we're going to be looking at a cluster of metabolic risk factors. This is the stuff that when we talk about trouble losing weight, weight loss resistance, insulin resistance, what's beneath the surface that's not allowing you to simply just count calories, track macros, eat less, move more, and get the results, right? What is it that's undermining 75% of the population here in the United States being overweight or obese? And it's not the weight in itself that's a problem. It's what eventually the weight does over years, months to years to decades that leads to the chronic lifestyle disease epidemics that we have. We know that insulin in itself, this metabolic function, is related to 8 out of the top 10 reasons for all-cause mortality. So we know the longer you carry the weight, the more likely you are to have a chronic lifestyle disease. So what we want to do is cut it off at the pass. So what is metabolic syndrome? Well, metabolic syndrome was me a few years ago.
Me
6
too.
years ago, 7 years ago. It's clinically defined as having at least 3 of the following. So elevated waist circumference. We talk about this visceral fat, this abdominal obesity. So greater than 40 inches in men and 35 inches in women. If you want to get how to measure that and why that matters and what the waist-height ratio is, you can go grab our insulin assessment on page 2 of that assessment. It shows you exactly how to do it and then calculate that. So you know. So greater than 40 inches in men and 35 inches in women. So that's that waist circumference. And there's another article that we came across, Tommy, where we're prepping for this batch of episodes that talked about adding those anthropometrics into the BMI calculations and what it did to correlate to disease process and mortality, right? So we've talked about the body roundness index. We talk about visceral adiposity. So this is one of the factors. So if you have 3 or greater, you're in this metabolic category, right? This metabolic syndrome. So that's number 1. Go ahead.
Yeah. Or just adding in those couple of measurements gave you up to a 50% boost in being able to detect an issue before you might see it on
to detect
labs
insulin resistance.
Or detecting insulin resistance regardless of your weight or how much additional weight you might want to lose, because it's not always directly correlated. It's not necessarily that you have to have 50 pounds to lose to have a substantial amount of insulin resistance. And we've seen that time after time after time. We've seen some folks lose 100 pounds and cut their A1C in half. And we've seen some people lose 20 or 25 pounds and have a 30 to 40% reduction in their A1C as well. So every body is different. And so it's great. So go to thefastingforlife.com/resources and grab that insulin assessment.
So that's the first one. Elevated waist circumference, visceral adiposity. The second one for metabolic syndrome is high triglycerides, right? So triglycerides greater than 150, low HDL. So air quotes, the good cholesterol, right? The HDL cholesterol, low HDL, elevated blood pressure, greater than 130/85, and elevated fasting glucose. Now, for metabolic syndrome, it's greater than 100. For us, it's greater than 90, right? We love to see it actually greater than 80, less than 86.
Yeah, we can do better, right?
Which would be even better. But so this was me years ago when I was trying to figure out, before I figured out insulin resistance and how powerful fasting could be and help me lose all the weight and get my labs back in check and blood pressure is normal and all those things. I had an elevated waist circumference. My triglycerides were elevated even though I was eating 90% clean. My HDL was low and my blood pressure was creeping up and my fasting glucose was in the 90s. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll just get back on the treadmill. I'll get back to working out. I'll stick to my macros. I'll count my calories.
I'll just try to do it better this time.
Yeah. I'll be more diligent, right?
Yeah.
So what do these things mean? So these are the 5 things. If you have 3 or more, this is what the people in the study had. They had 3 or more of these. And what the common shared root of these factors is rooted in insulin resistance. So excess visceral fat, low physical activity. Together, these markedly raise cardiovascular and metabolic risk beyond any one single factor alone. So when we have a combination of these in aggregation, this is where we see a direct relationship to insulin resistance and all the stats and data that I shared just a few minutes ago. So when we look at this study, they were looking at 701 participants with 3 or more of those factors I just mentioned. And what they were looking at was, does intermittent fasting compared to consistent energy restriction or consistent calorie restriction improve metabolic health, or these biomarkers of metabolic health? And what the outcome was, we'll just say it broadly and then we can get into some of the specifics, was intermittent fasting. Now, the cool thing about this study was it was all types of different intermittent fasting regimens. Ramadan type fasting, ADF, which is alternate day fasting, time restricted eating, which is your daily 16-8, 18-6, 24 type of fasting windows. 5-2, which isn't really fasting. We won't even talk about that one. But from 1 all the way up to 16 weeks. And the control groups practice continuous energy restriction or continuous calorie restriction. And everyone maintained their usual dietary patterns, right? Or they were given a low carb or a DASH diet. And what intermittent fasting did across all these varied windows was because we know ADF typically takes the cake, and we'll share some data on that in a little bit in terms of the inflammatory markers. But intermittent fasting reduced or improved with a high certainty of evidence your fasting blood glucose, your A1C, your insulin resistance, your LDL cholesterol, and your IL-6 inflammatory markers. Now, when we look at blood glucose, overall, not fasting, we look at CRP, HDL, and triglycerides. So those are a couple of the other markers that we saw in metabolic syndrome, right? Now, they did not differ between the groups, but Tommy, when you look at the graphs that you went in and nerded out on, we saw that they were trending in the right direction.
Yeah, and so when you have a systematic review like this, one thing to point out that's really, really good is that you can take all of these varied schedules, varied protocols, and methodology for fasting, and then say, in general, how is fasting in general stacking up against caloric restriction, which is kind of where most of us kind of come into fasting with some sort of history with calorie restriction, calories in, calories out.
Ultimately just trying to diet and lose weight.
Right. And usually it tends to get harder as we get older, but for a lot of us with a history of insulin resistance that may have started at a very young age, or maybe we developed it later on, there could be, gestational diabetes, or, it could be thought about as sometimes like the family curse, like, my mom or my grandmother or somebody else has diabetes. So, there's just insulin resistance around, and you can kind of see it, and it might also reflect in some of the food, the behavioral patterns within the family, things like that. Or it could be a culture of late night snacking within your family, all of these kind of things. We all have a different history with it. But when we take a review like this, we can see trend lines, and we can also see, okay, intermittent fasting in general, all these different methods are doing well. And so that's great. One of the limitations, however, is that when we have something like a modified ADF going for 16 weeks, which is a very powerful length of time to be measuring, and also a powerful intermittent fasting protocol as well, then some of the encouraging results can get a little hidden until we actually dive into the data a little bit more.
And we get longer in the duration.
Yes. Because when you have like a 1 week study or a 4 week study, then those tend to dilute the effects of the 16-week study. The same thing happens if we have a Ramadan type fast, or something more like, a 14 or a 16-hour fast,
right,
versus this ADF protocol. Then you also have a bit of power dilution within some of the stronger protocols, right?
And this is why I loved, with the high certainty of evidence, we saw fasting blood glucose, A1C, insulin resistance, HOMA-IR, LDL, and IL-6 all come down. And then the other markers of metabolic syndrome trending in that right direction the longer you get, which is something that we preach here, is that beginning with the end in mind, that fasting is not just a caloric restriction diet mentality, on-off mentality. It can, when applied in a consistent, true lifestyle application, hitting 80%, right, 5 out of 7 days a week, this is where you're going to see those long-term benefits come in, which is not just in the scale, right, but in those metrics that are driving whether or not that number on the scale is moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and the inflammatory markers is such a big one too, because that drives so much of how we feel day to day and what we're able and willing to do, even just that
cravings,
drive. Yeah.
Leptin, hunger hormones, etc.
Activity level, whether you just wanting to get out of bed,
desire to do the activity.
That starts with how you feel. Do you have joint pain? Are you achy all the time? Or do you just feel like you're kind of drained of energy? We talked in a recent podcast episode about that battery and like how to get better at charging your battery. And part of that is related to inflammatory markers. And so just seeing that 16 weeks of modified ADF within this study, seeing a 50 to 100% boost in the decrease of those inflammatory markers across those 16 weeks. I mean, if nothing else,
and if you're older and more sedentary and you got joint issues and knee pain and back pain, man, a decrease in inflammation would probably help you want to get out and go for that post-meal walk, right?
100%.
Right.
100%. It would also help you to, get outside of your comfort zone, try some new activities, do some things that are exciting, do some things that are fun. All of a sudden you have more dopamine coming in. Guess what? If I have activity-based dopamine that I wasn't having access to before due to immobility, now all of a sudden I have less of a need to find those same dopamine hits within the kitchen or within the pantry or the fridge. And all of a sudden, things start to feel like they're working a little bit more naturally and intuitively, and I don't feel like I'm having to white knuckle myself through the fast as often. And I mean, you talk about a powerful lever. That's one thing that really adds up over time for greater success.
Yeah, and if weight loss is just like an eat less, move more, I just got to go do it more diligently, then why do so many people, like especially smart, experienced people, spend years tracking, counting, and still feeling stuck? They still feel on that roller coaster.
Absolutely.
Of like on, off, and that's why we really, really, really double down on this mindset of, if you do nothing, right? If you just stay the course, or you keep doing what you're doing, or go back to just, the calorie counting, tracking things you've done in the past. IF clearly beats the keep doing what you're doing or what you've done in the past.
Yeah.
You're going to see more weight loss, smaller waist circumference, lower fat mass with lean mass largely preserved, which is a good thing. Better insulin and HOMA-IR, insulin sensitivity, modest improvements in the triglycerides and cholesterol, right? You're going to be moving the beneath the surface metrics, right, that are going to keep you motivated and to get that scale continually moving, not every day, right? Not every week, but continually moving down, which is going to motivate you to want to keep going.
Well, yeah, and so when you know that, like, you can't necessarily measure all of these things all of the time. Like, you're gonna have to wait a little while. I mean, minimum maybe 2 or 3 months between. Like, hey, I'm really curious if my blood work's changed at all. So you're not gonna have a week to week, metric on most of these things. But that's okay. So you can take this data and have more confidence that doing a consistent fasting protocol is going to be helping underneath the surface. It's going to be setting the stage physiologically for a better response. And you mentioned the scale moving, Scott. That's something that a lot of us in a fat loss phase will check in on either daily or, maybe
sometimes
at least
too much.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Sometimes too much. But it can feel like, well, I need to keep tabs. I'd like to be able to track my progress. And maybe it's the only thing that I have to track progress. And so, if that's the case, knowing that you're setting the stage under the surface for better balanced blood work, and also that when you're doing that, you are creating an environment where your body can have those body composition shifts.
Yep.
You can be burning more fat. Burning fat, like what happens on the scale, is really a lag measure for the action that you've been taking more recently. So if you think about it like that, and you're setting the stage, you don't necessarily have to be as attached to day-to-day movements on the scale. You can take this as a weekly, I'm going to do more of what I know is going to be working, and I can zoom out a little bit. It gives you a little bit of mental freedom to know I'm helping to fix my blood work, and that's going to lead to some changes on the scale, even if I don't see it today or tomorrow. Maybe a few days from now, it will be a little more caught up. I'll see some movement. That will be a dopamine hit as well. But we're able to zoom out, and that's really powerful.
Yeah, when we're looking at this fasting framework, it's versus the old diet mentality. Speaking from personal experience and so many stories that we've heard, is the constant tracking and counting, and that as your main control lever, right? With the moral language tied in of, we have good and bad food list, or you're on or off the wagon, or you just need to, like, you're in a higher blood sugar energy state with a higher insulin response, but a lower calorie day-to-day white knuckling, spread thin. You're always hungry. If you've done calorie restriction and gotten close to your goal weight, right, your body's going to throw a temper tantrum. And that scale obsession, or short-termism, where it's like, oh, how do I lose 10 pounds by X date, right?
Yeah.
So we really focus on, that fasting framework. Like what intermittent fasting does is it's the different physiology, same physics, but different psychology kind of equation of, getting into a deficit. It's going to compress your decisions into a defined window or defined days when you're fasting, which reduces that decision fatigue. Hunger becomes more predictable and trainable rather than just chaotic.
Yeah.
Right? Like, like hangry. Like, what am I going to do?
Or autopilot, where you almost feel like you don't really have any control over that. You just kind of, you do things, and then you reflect on them later, like, oh, what was I doing? I don't even feel like I made that choice. I was I just did it.
And there's less of that micro negotiation throughout the day, like how many calories do I have left, right? Like, can I fit this in? And it's more like simple rules. Like I eat between here and here, and I normally eat, 5 days of really consistent fasting. And then on the weekends, I open up my windows a little bit more to give myself, some more opportunity to enjoy and do family things and basketball games and travel and events and that type of stuff. So it's the adherence that we follow, and we talk about this a lot when we look at different studies, is specifically with ADF and different TRE or intermittent fasting windows, 16-8, 18-6, 24, 24-hour fast, OMADs once or twice a week, etc. The adherence is really high compared to an old school diet mentality, right? So it's really cool to see when you look at some of the specifics in the data, the fasting blood sugar, time-restricted fasting or time-restricted eating, that 16-8, 18-6, 24, that was the thing that was identified as the fasting method to get the biggest blood sugar reduction. And when your blood sugar is more balanced and more stable, you have less of that volatility, less of the hangerness, less of the hunger, which is going to allow insulin to balance, which is going to allow you to tap into fat stores more readily and stay more consistent, right? And then when you look at the reduction in insulin levels in these studies, in this meta-analysis, we saw a higher shift towards the older adults, right? The ones that have been carrying the weight and probably have more of that resistance that's been building over the years.
Sure.
And then HOMA IR compared to intermittent calorie restriction, right, which is that on-off diet mentality, it blew it out of the water in terms of getting your HOMA IR, which is the gold standard for your insulin resistance, in check. And then the A1C levels, same thing. Higher BMI, the more weight you have to lose, the more elevated blood sugar you have, and insulin resistance, the beneath the surface stuff, the metabolic syndrome type stuff. We saw the greater significant changes in those populations as well. So young or old, you're still going to get the benefit, right? You're still going to, we want you to feel empowered that it's not just about setting a timer and making a better food decision, right, Tommy?
Yeah, no, there's so many things that you have active control over, and it's about taking those small actions, but it's about understanding why would I want to take those small actions, like I said earlier in the conversation. So when we really dive into the data a little bit more within this systematic review, what we can also see is that multiple points along the metabolic syndrome and along the what else matters under the surface besides just the overall change in body weight, because really what we want is a better body composition and better blood work, better physiology, right? And if we can have that at the same weight, that's fine. That's still a huge win. But overall, we know if the weight's trending down, then we tend to be moving in the right direction. At least we kind of hope that we are. But if you can separate yourself from needing to see the change in the scale so much, then you can understand, you can appreciate some of what happened here during some of these studies, like during the modified ADF being one of the most effective ways to reduce visceral fat as measured by waist circumference, which is the highest correlate for cardiovascular risk and fatty liver and metabolic syndrome. It drives all of those things. So we can start to get a handle on that. And even if you're not at a modified ADF level, or you find like that's been a little difficult for you lately for whatever reason, then there was still beneficial effects from time-restricted eating. 14 hours is better than 12 hours, 16 is better than 14, 18 is better than 16, and so on. So we don't have to like get it all right immediately, but we can get started and build in some consistency, and we will be moving the needle on some of these things. The same thing with blood pressure, where we're seeing a drop in systolic blood pressure, and it's substantial. All we need is a 10-point drop to significantly reduce the risk for stroke and heart disease over time. And that's not even to mention the fasting blood glucose, like you mentioned for these other protocols too. So we have a lot of levers here, and that's not even to say we're not even talking about food choices yet. I'm just talking about same calories, different timing, and just how that timing matters so much.
I don't know about you, but doing less and getting a bigger bang for your buck sounds good to me. And that's that whole simplification, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's why we love fasting, and it simplified my life dramatically and still does to this day. So when we look at the why behind your fasting, it's not just necessarily the scale, it's those metabolic targets that this study was really cool to kind of outline. And specifically, again, the TRE, the 18.6, the 16.8, the 26, consistently is going to be the thing that drives the biggest bang for your buck. So you're not just chasing the scale, you're really targeting the root drivers, the high sugar, high insulin, bad LDL, and inflammation that none of us want to have when we do our yearly checkup with our providers, right?
Absolutely.
So the key of like applying this is, okay, where are you at? Like take stock of what are the windows that work for you? What's your consistency number? Where have you been? Right? What have you been doing? Are you still operating in the old mindset, but just using fasting as a way to get into a caloric deficit? Because that's that diet mentality. So we want to pick a pattern that works for you. Pick a consistent fasting schedule. So head to the show notes, grab the blueprint. It's a 20-page PDF. It gives you some fasting schedules, it gives you a little bit of the science of where we're at and why we do it. And then you really want to kind of match your pattern to, in a couple of instances, to your metabolic profile. So if you have a higher BMI, higher waist circumference, know that to get the better insulin resistance outcomes and these metabolic outcomes, you can't just do this for a week.
Yeah.
This has to be give it 90 days, because this is where we truly see when we get into that 12 to 16 week category, you're going to see the benefits. It's just going to be a little bit slower in the beginning. So begin with the end in mind, right? So if glucose and blood sugar swings and hunger and cravings are your problem, then you're going to want to shrink in and just pick a daily window that you know is a little bit outside of your comfort zone.
Sure.
Right? And make a couple of better food choices or meal choices, right? Cook one of the meals at home. Don't eat out. Go a little bit lower carb. Double your protein intake, right? Because it's really about focusing on the right metrics and not just the scale. But in the old diet mentality, we get stuck so much on the scale.
Yeah.
Right? So now I only weigh in on Tuesdays. And I take a monthly average because I'm in a maintenance phase. I'm working on the visceral fat. So I do a DEXA scan twice a year to make sure that I'm decreasing because I was an old power lifter, tried bodybuilding, couldn't do it. I just blame my genetics, but it was really a discipline thing. Go figure. Power lifter, CrossFitter, looked like I could bench press a Buick, had the big neck, the big biceps, the big chest, but I also had the big belly. Right? And that belly is that insulin resistance. So for me now, it's focusing on getting the visceral fat down. So my decisions I make in terms of my fasting efforts aren't really even related to the scale anymore. I just check in to make sure, hey, am I staying stable? Am I fully operating in a maintenance type mindset, right?
Yeah. And in order to kind of put some perspective on it for that long term, keep beginning with the end in mind that you said, I like to look at it as you want that spot. The sweet spot is a little bit outside of your comfort zone, like you said, but without the feelings of, man, I really couldn't do this for very long. The more you're feeling like I really couldn't keep this up, the more you're kind of waiting to throw in the towel on the method. And that's what a lot of us felt like a lot of the time with calories in, calories out, because as the results slow on the scale and as it gets more and more clear that nothing's really changing right now, even though I'm sticking to the plan, then you're kind of just waiting to throw in the towel on that. And so if you think about building a fasting lifestyle a little bit differently, how I like to think about it is what is the method that feels doable right now without being overly restrictive? And if and when I want to develop another tool in my fasting tool belt, then great, I'll do that, but knowing that fat loss is going to be different from maintenance, and that also I can be a faster and I can use fasting without going for my next longest fast. And because that's not where the magic really happens. And so if you're having any trouble pushing outside of your current comfort zone, or you want some help kind of accelerating that process, I'm also going to encourage everybody to go ahead and just sign up for the next challenge.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to be a great way for us to get the process started, but then also teach you how to accelerate that process too, because there really is a method to the madness. But sometimes when we're doing it on our own on Fasting Island, it really kind of feels like I'm just not really sure what to do next right now, or what would be the best thing to kind of focus on. Is it my food choices? Is it what's going on with the scale? Is it the blood work? Do I need to be measuring ketones or blood sugar? All of these kind of things and all these question marks sometimes just lead to analysis paralysis. So we're going to really help you figure out how to take the next action so you can see your next result.
Yeah, I mean, and this is that, like fasting, anchoring fasting as a long-term, like, adjunct therapy, right? Like, it's part of your long-term plan. It's part of your long-term strategy alongside your lifestyle changes, right? But it's going to be the biggest lever that you can pull if done consistently. So, Tommy, I love the fact that there's data to back it up, but I also love the fact that we have tens of thousands of messages over the years and 5 million downloads and, I don't know, 65 or 6,600 challengers, right? You alluded to the challenge earlier. I feel like I haven't said that over the last few episodes, so apologies that we haven't been letting you know that there is a accelerator for you.
Absolutely.
If you want to get the deep dive on it, and we can support you over the course of those 7 days. But really, just intermittent fasting isn't about the perfectionism, right? It isn't about the I'm going to fast longer because of what I did this weekend, or I'm going to do a long fast because I know I'm going to go off the rails. It's not about reparations or punishment. It's truly a structured, proven way to give your metabolic function, your metabolism, a break that it's been begging for, and move you out of the metabolic syndrome danger zone that I was in, not being able to figure it out, really just one day at a time. Right? So you don't have to overhaul, Tommy, to what you were just talking about. You don't have to overhaul everything overnight. Pick a schedule, stick with it, shoot for 80%, get your labs done, and and just know that beneath the surface, you're driving the metabolic needle.
Yeah.
Long before, right? Like, let your labs and how you feel tell the story that change is happening long before you or the world can see it.
That's a great perspective.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's happening. It's working. We just got to stay the course. So, Tommy, as always, man, I appreciate the conversation. If you guys are looking for more support, you can head to the show notes, sign up for the next challenge, grab the Blueprint to Fasting for Fat Loss, grab the insulin assessment, reach out to us if you got questions. We are on this journey with you. But as always, man, I appreciate the conversation, and we will talk soon.
Thank you. Bye. So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.